Hello, and welcome to another episode of Tween Book Bites here at the Scott County Public Library in Georgetown, Kentucky. As always, I am Miss Kelly, and this is Miss Mary Lou.
Good morning.
And today, on our menu of book bites, we've got some Indigenous literature for you, written by members of First Nations or about. I think most of them are by.
I think one book that we're going to be talking about was written by a person that is not Indigenous. Everything else, but it's a history that I think people will learn a lot from, so I'm going to recommend it. Everything else is going to be by Indigenous writers from different nations.
Yes.
Yes. So I'm going to start off. I'm going to talk about the one book that was not written by an Indigenous person. And this book is called Undefeated Jim Fort in the Carlisle Indian School Football Team. Now, I'm not a football fan. I don't watch it. I'm not, I can get into it, but it's not my sport. I'm a basketball person all the way. And so I put off reading this book for a long time. Usually anything by Steve Sheinkin, I love to read it. I love his books. I love his writing. And he just makes history so fascinating. But I because I knew we were going to be doing this, I said, well, it's time for me to read this book. And it was really, really good. Shine can take a topic you're not even really interested in and flesh it out and make it so interesting. And while this book is about football, it's about a lot of other things as well. And it will give you a lot of history of what happened after the late 1800s. Up until the 1800s, there was a lot of conflict over land. The settlers, the U.S. government, and the First Nations were frequently fighting over land, and of course the First Nations were constantly being pushed off their land. All that's kind of done in the late 1800s. So what happened with First Nations people? Well, I'm going to tell you about one school that was set up for Native American children called the Pratt School. I'm sorry, it was called the Carlisle School. It was started by an Army officer named Pratt. And it was a typical school. There were a lot of these schools set up to solve the Indian problem. What to do with these First Nations children. They decided to set up these schools, and they were boarding schools mostly. And these children were taken to these schools to get the Indian out of them. They were educated, but the schools were used to strip them of their culture and their language. As soon as they got there, their heads were shaved, their clothing was burned, they were issued uniforms, they were not allowed to speak their native language. So until they learned English, they could not communicate together. None of their cultural celebrations or religious celebrations were allowed to be observed. They were worked from morning to night. They had to grow their food, they had to provide all the labor to maintain the school as well as go to school. It was a very rigid and structured life. A lot of the young people got a good vocational education, but just as many as finished ran away because they were so homesick and they missed their families and they missed their way of life. So kids were always running away from these schools. They were pretty brutal. And then if they did complete their schooling and got vocational training, white businesses wouldn't hire them, so it really didn't do them a lot of good anyway. So this story follows Jim Fort, who grew up, his parents were a mixture of Fox, I think it's a nation called Suk, S-U-C, I think I'm saying it right, I have to look at my notes again, and white. They were a mixture of these people. And Jim Thorpe had a twin brother, Charlie, who died fairly young, but their father was a hard man. This wife was, Thorpe's mother was his third wife, and he wanted his boys to be tough. And they even tell a story when Jim was just a toddler, his father threw him in a river and said, good luck. And the toddler had to paddle to shore before being washed away. His father didn't help him. But he grew up very tough, and in his community, wrestling was a big sport, and they would wrestle in the evening, and Jim Thorpe grew up to be really strong and very competitive. His father wanted him to be educated. He would send him to local schools or to boarding schools nearby. Jim Thorpe would always run away and come back home, particularly when his brother died. They were very close, and he was just crushed when his brother died. So his father decided to send him all the way to Pennsylvania to the Pratt School, because that way he couldn't run away back home to Oklahoma. And that is where Jim Thorpe was first introduced to football, which was a totally unstructured sport at the time. There were no rules. Players were seriously injured or killed all the time. No complaining, though, or you were a wimp. And it was only played by the most elite colleges, the Ivy Leagues, Harvard, Princeton, Cornell, and Pratt had a football team. They ended up hiring Carlisle School. I keep calling it Pratt School. Pratt hired a coach from Cornell to come down and coach the Carlisle football team. And Jim Thorpe, when he was just a little skinny guy, saw it and he just went out there and he grabbed that football and he started playing and they put him on the team. And he grew to be the best football player, perhaps of all times. He was just phenomenal. And because the Indigenous players were smaller than their counterpoints on the Ivy League teams, they were just physically smaller, they developed strategy. Up until that point, there was no strategy with football. Everybody just went out there and tried not to get the snot knocked out of them or beat out of them by the other players. And they had to come up with strategy like making plays and how to run the ball and how to use their agility and smaller size to sneak through these mobs of larger football players. And it worked. For a couple of seasons, they were the best football team in the country. I mean, hands down, their wins were by huge margins. And Jim Thorpe became an international star. He also started running track. And he went to the Olympics in 1912 and won so many gold medals. It was crazy because he competed in every field and track event, including, I think, the decathlon, and won. He was a really amazing athlete. Unfortunately, his life really went downhill after he left Carlisle. His first child died literally in his arms, and it brought back it was an enormously painful experience, brought back a lot of pain from the death of his brother, and he did begin drinking. He was stripped of his gold medals because it was found out that in the summers, to make money, he would play baseball on minor league teams, which many athletes did. But because he was Indigenous, a big deal was made out of it. He was stripped of his medals because he was no longer an amateur. A lot of white players did the same. They weren't stripped of their medals. His life ended up being, once again, really hard. But there was a time when he was just the best athlete in the country. So if you read this book, you're going to learn a lot about what happened to Indigenous people, what the boarding schools were like that these Indigenous children went to, how they were stripped of their culture, how they tried to find their way in the world as it was changing and how difficult that was. But you're also going to learn a lot about the history of football in a way that's really interesting even to people who don't like football. So, Undefeated, Jim Thorpe and the Carlisle Indian School football team by Steve Scheinman. It's really good.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah.
All right, and I will kind of piggyback off that. My first book is Indian No More by Charlene Willing McManus with Tracy Sorrell, and it was the gold medal I can talk. Gold medal winner of the American Indian Library Association Youth Literature Award, I think just last year, and I can see why. It's really, really, really good. And I say piggybacking because in this book, our main character, Regina, her grandmother went to one of these schools. And thankfully she came back they live on a reservation, and she came back and was able to get some of her culture back. And Regina struggles. The very beginning of the book is set in 1955 when they learn about the Federal Indian Relocation Program, which basically the American government was like, nah, you're not Indian anymore, so we're taking your land and you're going to go somewhere else. And it took a couple years for that to go through. So in 1957 is the rest of the book, which is also the civil rights era. And so Regina and her family, it's moved to LA. It's her little sister, her parents, and their grandmother, which she calls Chich. And it's them. Regina is like, oh man, with the signing of a piece of paper, all of a sudden I am no longer Indian. And so she's struggling because she's like, but I mean, I am. I am still Indian. And so she's trying to keep her culture, learning things from her grandmother, who she just adores, and who is really unhappy living in LA. They've moved away from all the other family. A lot of them stayed on the land, and it's really hard to read, but it's really good. Regina meets her new neighbors, and they're black, and there's a tale about trick-or-treating one year when they go around, and they are called terrible names because they go to the block, just they go down one block, and all these terrible white teenage boys are just they are egged and called horrible names, and Regina is struggling, and it's just so good. I want to give it away because it's not a very long book. There's not much text on each page. It's only like 100 and I think it's like 200 pages, but the last bit is actually information. Yeah, it's 168 pages of it's pretty short. And then the back matter is really interesting because it gives you information. I mean, I knew who the Three Stooges were, but I don't know if younger kids would know that. It also gives you a little more information. And this book is based on the author's personal experiences. Yeah, so Charlene Willing McManus based it around, Regina is a member of the Grand Ronde tribe, which McManus was a member of as well. Unfortunately, she passed away having only finished the first draft of the book, so she left it with her friend Tracy Sorrell, who went back and finished the manuscript for her. And it's really interesting because she and even the editor, there are notes from McManus, Sorrell, and the editor all about what they went through to try and make sure that this book is truly an authentic experience of the time for the people of the Grand Ronde tribe. And it's really good.
Excellent. I want to read it.
Yeah.
The next book I'm going to talk about is the last piece of historical fiction I'm going to talk about. This is one of my all-time favorite children's books. It's up there in my top, I have to say maybe I have 10 favorites, and this is up there with the top 10. And this is called the Birchbark House series. And it's written by Louise Erdrich, who is of the Ojibwe Nation. She normally writes for adults, and she is one of my favorite adult writers. I love her writing. And, for a long time I put off reading these books because I thought the covers, well, this is going to sound kind of snotty of me, but I'm going to be honest. I thought the covers looked kind of childish. There's 5 of them in the series, and I looked at them and I didn't, they just, I don't know. But it's Louise Erdrich's art, which was interesting to find out. And as you read the book, there's a lot of pictures in here. They're very small, but beautiful sketches. And, now that I know more about it, I love the fact that this is her artwork. And the books are they're just wonderful. They're not very long, but they, I normally don't read a whole series. I'll read the first one so I have a taste of it so that I can make better recommendations for you all. This is one of the few series that I read, all 5 of them. I just enjoyed them so much. The first 3 in the series are about a girl named Omachias. And I'm going to say she's maybe 10 or 11 when the series starts. The first 3 books are about her, and by the time the last book, you get to the third book that she's in as a child, she's 12. The last 2 books are about her son. So you have her as a character as an adult, but the books are about her twin boys, Chickadee and, I can't remember the other one's name. Chickadee and McCoons, yes. Anyway, this book takes place, I'm trying to remember what year it's in. It is as the land is gradually being taken away from Native people as the white settlers are moving further and further west. Omachias' family lives up near, I want to say, Wisconsin, I think that's right, up near the Great Lakes, and their life is very much built around the landscape of the lakes. They fish, they boat, but they also have gardens. They do a lot of gathering. They hunt, and it's a very peaceful existence. And the cultural upbringing is very much about how to live life in balance. Their religious beliefs are wrapped up so much in nature, and there was a constant seeking of balance and respect and care for nature in their culture. And part of Omakaya's coming of age is finding her spirit animal. And she has a unique bond with bears. She meets a bear and her cubs in the woods one day. And if you know anything about, bears, you encounter a mother bear with a cub, that is a really dangerous situation, because that is one of the few times a bear will kill you to protect their cubs. This mother bear does not kill Omakayas. She lets Omakayas and the cub come together. And so she builds this strong bond with the bears. And her grandmother, who is a kind of a healer in their community, she begins to learn healing from her grandmother. They have a very special relationship. Now, the community has already been hit by smallpox. In fact, Omakayas is not the biological child of her parents. She was found on another island by a woman in their community, one of the best characters in the whole story, as the only survivor of a smallpox outbreak in her community on another island further off the lake. And this woman in their community picked up Omakayas and brought her back, and was adopted by the family that she is raised in. And during the course of, I believe, the first book, there is another outbreak of smallpox, and it goes through their family. And Omakayas becomes, she and her grandmother take care of everyone, because they both had it before and they don't get it, or they've been exposed to it, I should say. Anyway, this is a book that will help you get a feel for the rhythm of their life. As the series goes on, you begin to feel the pressure of the settlers moving in. They're forced to move several times. But it reads, and it was inspired by the Little House on the Prairie books. And as I love Little House on the Prairie books, there are some issues with those books that you may have read about, that some concerns of how Native Americans are portrayed in those books, that a lot of people find objectionable. I love the characters, and I love how it portrayed the life that they live. This one does a very similar thing. And Erdrich said she was inspired by those books to write these stories, to get the feel of a child coming of age in this life, and how they deal with some extreme hardships, some illness and death and suffering. And then the same thing with her two boys. Oh, these books were just hysterical. Parts of them. There's some really hard stuff too about her two boys. And as you look at these books, you'll see a lot of medals on them. The writing in them is just stunningly good. So this is the Birchbark House series. The first one is called The Birchbark House. It was a National Book Award finalist, and it's because the writing is just so very good. There you go. That's my last piece of historical fiction. Everything else is going to be contemporary.
I think, yeah, both of the next ones of mine. So this is also historical fiction. This is the first in a trilogy. I think only 2 of the 3 books are available at the moment. This is How I Became a Ghost, a Choctaw Trail of Tears story by Tim Tingle. And so if you know anything, have heard of the Trail of Tears, you can get the idea that this book is going to be sad. And also the fact that the book is called How I Became a Ghost. Yep, it's literally how this kid becomes a ghost. So I make that sound terrible. It's not. It's really, really good. So our main character here is Isaac, and he's this great little dude. But they have just found out that this plays off my first book as well. They're being forced off their land by the American government, and so they're told there's treaty talk, and so they're like, oh no, okay, we're gonna have to move, and so Isaac's mother is like, hey, come here. I know things have been weird today, but you need to see this. So she takes him, and they go and see all the elders are like mourning the loss of their land. So the old men are like scraping their backs against the trees and bleeding, and they go to the river, and the women are like cutting their feet all up on the sharp rocks in the river. And in both of these instances, Isaac, all of a sudden he gets this weird warm tingly feeling, and he sees certain people burst into flames or get these horrid sores all over their bodies. And somehow Isaac just knows that this means that he is going to die soon, and he is witnessing how these people are gonna die. He doesn't. At first, he's just totally freaked out, and then he kind of understands that when that night their house is lit on fire. All of the houses around are lit on fire by the white men, the military, and anybody that makes it out alive flees to the swamps. And they're doing fine. They build shelters. They're able to fish and hunt and live off the land. It's no big deal until winter hits, and it's of course freezing. And the army comes, and they're like, here's some blankets. Isaac's mom is like, no, we're not going to take those. Which turns out to be a very good choice, because they were, of course, infested with smallpox. And so anybody that took it then it comes down with all these terrible sores, and they're killed. So Isaac's family once again is on the move, and they are on what becomes the Trail of Tears, where so many people died. It was terrible. And they meet up with another family, and there's this cute little girl, Nita, who decides that Isaac is her big brother, and so she just like adopts him. She's like, no, you're my brother now. And so the families become really close, and then Nita dies. She rolls out of her blanket in the middle of the night in the winter, and she freezes to death. But then her ghost comes to Isaac and is like, hey, you can make my parents happy again. You need to find my sister. And he's like, you have a sister? So the rest of the book is on the trail, trying to find Nita's older sister Naomi, who has been taken by the members of the army, and is being forced to like cook their meals and take care of them. And there's another character named, I didn't write his name down. I wrote everybody else's name down. Bother. There's another character who it turns out can turn into a panther. Hence our very pretty book cover here. And so Isaac and this other boy are working together to try and get Naomi back. It's really good. Real sad, because there's a whole lot of death, but it's very good. Oh.
Yeah, I don't know if you all know that smallpox had not been on this continent until it was brought over from Europe, and the native people had no resistance to it all, and that was responsible for more deaths than anything in the indigenous people when the settlers came. Okay, so fantasy. I do want to tell you all that for a long time it was really hard to find books published by mainstream publishers that by indigenous writers about indigenous experiences. And that is changing rapidly. I cannot believe how many books are coming out now. There's even a whole imprint called Heart Drum Books that is all native writers. So you're getting all genres. You're getting historical, you're getting contemporary realistic fiction, and you're getting fantasy. And this book, The Barren Grounds, is the first book in, I hope I'm going to say this right, the Misawa Saga. And this book is definitely inspired by Chronicles of Narnia. They mention it several times, and if you've read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, this really parallels it. This is a story of two children. They are both of the Cree Nation. Morgan is almost 13, and she's been in foster care for as long as she can remember, maybe since she was 2 or 3. She has no memory of her mother, and nobody has ever told her why her mother had to release her into foster care. She's never been adopted. She's always gone from foster home to foster home to foster home. She's a very angry girl. She's had, she's not been abused, but she has never been, like a family will take her into foster care and, oh, you're one of our family. But then the family will do things like go on a camping trip and put her in respite care. Or they'll go to the movies once a week, but Morgan always stays at home because they need their family time. And so she's always like told she's a member of the family, but never quite. And it hurts, it really hurts. And as she's gotten more towards adolescence, she's gotten angrier, acting out more, which means families get rid of her or she runs away. Well, she is in a new foster home with Karen. I'm trying to remember her foster parent's name, and I may not have it written down. I'm sorry. I think it's like Karen. It's Katie and James. Katie and James are her new foster parents, and they're white. They don't have children. They're young. They're in their 20s. They're well off, and they're very well intentioned and very enthusiastic. They want to have foster children. They want to help children. I believe Katie's a teacher, and she has encountered foster children in foster care. And Morgan, you kind of wish Morgan had had this family a long time ago. Her life might have been different. And she's just eye roll angry at this family that's trying so hard to make her feel at home. And then they take Eli into foster care. Eli's a year younger than Morgan. He's 11, and this is his first experience in foster care. He has lived with his Cree father. He and Morgan are both of the Cree Nation. And so he has grown up in Cree culture, raised by his father. In this first book, this is the first book in the series, and it's new, so it's not out yet. We don't know all of Morgan's backstory yet. I think that's going to come. She begins to get glimpses of her mother. Eli has not revealed any of his backstory yet. I'm just guessing that's going to come in the later volumes. But this is his first experience away from his father. And the feeling is his relationship with his father was very loving. So we don't know what happened there. But he is really, really sad to not be in his own home. And he is an artistically talented boy. He draws a lot, and that's how that's kind of how he copes. And Morgan's just put up a ton of walls. She has no friends. She just pushes everybody away. She sits in the back of the classroom. But she's a reader. She loses herself in fantasy. She loved the Chronicles of Narnia. So, James and Katie are doing things like going to the Indigenous restaurant and bringing home Indigenous food and giving her, authentic moccasins. And Morgan's it just makes her angry, and she lashes out. She's so mean. And Eli's like, why are you so mean? But to comfort her, he draws her a picture of this vision that keeps coming to him of this barren, snow-covered landscape, no trees, and there's this what he calls a fissure. It's some kind of a creature, and he calls it a fissure. That may be a creature that's way up in northern Canada where the story takes place. But it looks like a kind of a giant, maybe, I can't really tell. It looks almost like a bear, but it's not a bear.
Like a Bigfoot?
Well, it's maybe like a big muskrat or something, walking on 2 feet, dressed. And they put the picture up, they found this little nook up in the attic where they're not supposed to go. And they put it up on the wall. And in the middle of the night, Morgan wakes up and it's freezing cold. And she kind of gets out of bed to figure out, well, where's the door left open? Why is it so cold in here? And she goes up the stairs into the attic where they like to hang out, and into the little room they found off the side of the attic where the picture was, and there's snow blowing in, and it's freezing cold. And the picture has become a portal into this land. And Eli's gone. She knows Eli's gone through the portal and he's in this land. And they've already bonded. There's a real quick bond that happens between the two of them. So she goes and gets her hoodie, and she gets her new moccasins, and she goes through the portal to find her foster brother. And they encounter this village of creatures. They're like human-like, but they're all animals. And there's this fisher, there's a bear, there's owls, but they all wear clothing, they speak, they walk upward bipedal, And they are starving to death because a human came in through some portal, lived with them. They had welcomed other humans at other times. But this human was a very greedy man, and he began to, he could never eat enough. He could never get enough. And he took and he took and he took and he took until the whole community was totally out of balance with its nature. And this man stole the birds of the land in a bag, and he ran away. And when he ran away, winter came. This area had 4 seasons, but winter came overnight, and it never went away. So for years they've been living in perpetual winter, and gradually all the game has died off because there's nothing to eat, and now this village is starving. And Morgan and Eli stay to try to help the fisher that comes to them, who is still strong enough to hunt. He hunts for all the rest of the people in his community. They're going to go find that man and end the winter, and they go on a journey with him. And again, if you've read the Chronicles of Narnia, you don't have to read Chronicles of Narnia. That doesn't matter. But you will see all these wonderful parallels.
Sounds very Narnia. I like
winter.
it.
Yeah. And it's the first. It resolves, but you can tell there's a lot more coming after it. So it sounds like each tale is going to kind of resolve its piece.
Mm-hmm.
But we know there's a lot of backstory to these 2 kids that we're going to get in the future. The Barren Grounds. It was written by David A. Robertson, who is also Cree himself and lives in Winnipeg. And I love this picture on the cover. I just love it. Okay.
All right. I will also get with my fantasy. This is one I've talked about before, so I probably won't talk about it too much. If you are curious, check out our Rick Riordan Presents Book Bites. So that's where I talk about this. This is one of those. It's Race to the Sun by Rebecca Rowanhorse, and it follows Njoni Begay, who is of the Navajo. There we go. Thank you, Inside Book Cover. Is a member of the Navajo Nation, and she and her brother Mac go to the local Indigenous school, and Joni is playing basketball, and she's not that great at it in the first place. And in this particular game, she looks up and she sees a dude in the bleachers that's just like staring at her. And it really freaks her out, especially because she's like, yeah, that dude's not human. He's definitely a monster. But no one else seems to notice. And so then she gets whacked in the face with the ball, falls down, passes out, gets a bloody nose, and they lose the game. So of course she's not doing well with the people at school. They're all annoyed with her. And she goes home, and she's in a bad mood and also kind of freaked out because monsters. What? And she meets her dad's new boss. They're supposed to all go out to dinner with him. His name is Mr. Charles, and surprise, he's the creepy monster dude from the basketball game. So yeah, he's a monster, and she's like, nah, Dad, no, you cannot work for him. This is not good. This is bad news. And then her dad's just like, oh my gosh, you need to be polite to my new boss. You're grounded. And Joni, she's just mad. So she goes and is pouting in her room, and then her little stuffed where is he? Yeah, this little dude, her stuffed lizard comes to life, and it's Mr. something. I've forgotten his name. I didn't write that one down. But he is great, and he's very sassy, and he comes to life and is like, okay, so you need to go do this thing. And so then she's off on a journey to try and figure out, because, oh yeah, Mr. Charles kidnapped her father. So it's really good. It's really fun.
Has the second one come out yet?
I don't think so.
Okay. I don't remember buying it, so.
No, and I think this may just be a standalone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be fine with there being a second one, but if I recall, this is just a standalone volume.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, another contemporary one, and I'm going to be short on this one too because I just started this book. I had hoped to have it read by today, but I did not. I'm almost 100 pages in, almost a third of the way through, but I started it yesterday, and I'm a slow reader. Kelly's a really fast reader. I'm really slow. So that says a lot that I got through 100 pages yesterday because I'm not a fast reader. It was really engaging from the very first page. This is called The Braid, and it was written by James Bird, who is also Ojibwe, just like Louise Erdrich. And this is about a boy who lives in California with his father. His father is white, and his father is a really sad man. He was a great football star in high school. He was like, you know, the king guy, the king of high school. And he's just one of these people who's never kind of lived beyond his glory days in high school. And he's an alcoholic, and he's kind of gone from job to job. He's been raising his son Colin alone, because Colin, well, I'm hoping I'm going to learn more about this. His father went to a rock concert when he was, 13 years ago. Colin's almost 13. He went to a rock concert and he met this beautiful Ojibwe woman. And they were together for that evening, and this child came out of that evening. She gave birth to a child, but she was very, very, very poor. And the father's family was able to talk her into giving them the child to raise because they're very wealthy and they would be able to provide for him. The grandparents actually raised him for his first 6 years. But Colin has this kind of OCD Tourette's condition, and it manifests itself in him having to count every letter of every word that is spoken to him. And he's got mathematic genius out the wazoo that he can listen to you talk to him. And as long as he's ever seen the word spelled, he remembers it and he can count the letters in it. So if you say to him, hey, good morning, how are you? The first thing he's going to say is the number of letters that were in the words that you just said to him. And he'll say, I'm fine, thank you, how are you? Every time anybody speaks to him, he has to tell you the number of syllables. And it drives his father nuts. His father's done everything, speech therapists, all kinds of therapists and doctors to try to fix this problem. And at school, oh my gosh, he's bullied so badly for it. The kids love to go up and make him do it. So the book opens with him in the principal's office, because at lunchtime a bunch of the bullies got in his face and were saying things, and one of them knocked his lunch plate into his lap. And his father, who's always telling him he needs to stand up to the bullies and be strong, so Colin stands up and gives this guy a bloody nose. He gets called to the principal's office and told, we don't want you in the school anymore. We're tired of dealing with your problem. And then when they get home, Colin learns that his father has called his mother, who he's never met, and he's sending her to live he's sending Colin to live with his mother. Okay? Because it turns out his father's lost his job, he's lost their home, he's just spiraling downward, even worse. So Colin, in the first 100 pages, is and I'm at the point where he's had about 48 hours with his mother, who lives on an Ojibwe reservation up in, I believe it's Minnesota or Michigan, one of those M states up there. And it's a whole new world for him, rather than Huntington Beach, California. But he finds a very warm welcome. He finds that he has a brother that he never knew about, who was in the military and was killed in service. His mother is stunningly beautiful. But he also, when he's out, he's trying to climb up, he's got a dog, and he's trying to climb a fence, and he falls, and he's always making kind of a buffoon of himself. And there's a tree house in the house next door, and there's a stunningly beautiful girl in that tree house that's laughing at him. And she throws a baseball and hits him in the head, knocks him over. She was trying to throw it for the dog, but she's laughing, and he is very taken by her. So where I am in the book, he's starting his first day of school. He's dreading it. He's terrified, but he also is trying to figure out how to meet this girl and not totally freak her out, because he always has to say numbers. And he's trying to figure out, can he build a new life in this community and find out, can he find healing with this Ojibwe way of life? And so we're going to see where it goes, but it's just really the writer is so good in creating a character that you really care about from the very first page. I like Colin so much.
All right. And my final book of the day is the first book in the Muddy Muskrats mystery series. It is The Case of Wendy Lake, written by Michael Hutchinson, who is, let me pull that up there, a citizen of the Mississippi Nation. Oh, I know I butchered that. I'm sorry. But he is Canadian, and this book takes place in Canada. So there are our 4 Mighty Muskrats: Sam, Otter, Ateem, and Chickadee. They are all cousins. This is a big family. There is no way we have met all of them in this first book. But the book kind of drops you in. You know that they've solved some mysteries in the past together. That's why their family jokingly calls them the Muddy Muskrats. It's like they're Scooby-Doo and the gang is kind of the thing. And so they you jump in and they learn from listening to one of their uncles and their grandfather speaking that one of the archaeologists that's here for the oil company has gone missing. They're like, oh no, the old white man's gone missing again. Guess we better find him, because this particular uncle is a member of the police force. And so he's like, we got this. I know you're going to go and investigate, so let me know what you find out. But, you probably shouldn't do that. But I know you're going to anyway. So they're out and about, they're looking, and then they're down at the docks where the oil company ships stuff off the lake. And they run into their cousin Denise, who's much older than them. She's very, sassy doesn't even really cover it. It sounds like she had a hard childhood. Her parents were maybe not totally there. She was more caring for them, but they have gone. I don't know that they've passed or if they've just gone elsewhere. But so now she's just very world weary, and also she's an activist. So she and some of her fellow activists are there protesting the oil company, and they manage to get through the gates. And Denise locks herself to a pole. So the story is back and forth between Denise going on, just sitting there with her, her protest, and her grandfather is like, "Yep, that's this is your vision quest. We'll see what you get out of this. But this is your time. You've chosen your place. So now you're gonna go through with it." And so she is just locked there. The uncle, the police, of course, are called, and the uncle's like, "Oh, Denise again, come on now." And so he convinces the manager to just, set up some boxes around her, because she's off on the side of the pier, and they're like, "Fine, can you convince her to go?" And he's like, "I'll do what I can, but she's my niece. I know she's trouble. I'll try." And so the Mighty Muskrats are going between, checking on their cousin every day, and then also trying to figure out what in the world happened to this archaeologist. They find out that his boat has been found, but not him. So they go and they're like, "Okay, what's happening here?" And the little twist that got me, the rope that would be used to tie the boat off on shore has been pulled out and dragged. So it looks like someone tried to pull the boat up on shore. And they're like, "Well, if the guy's not here, who did this? Has something real bad happened to this dude? Uh-oh." And the way they solved that, I would never have guessed it in a million years. It was delightful. So I highly suggest this. It's a very quick read. It's 150 pages.
And there's more.
There's I think the third one comes out soon. I saw it on NetGalley recently. Okay. And we've got the second one as well.
Yeah.
So if you want a nice mystery, it's kind of like an updated Nancy Drew or Hardy Boys, I would say. Because it's modern, it's set on a reservation in Canada, and the kids are just delightful. They all have their own characteristics. Yeah, it's good fun.
And if we're trying to identify these books, and I see I need to do more of this with the label. It's a turtle that's by Indigenous authors.
Yes.
So I can see I need to put some more labels on these.
Yes.
The very last book I'm going to talk about is a picture book, and it's called We Are Water Protectors, and it was written by Carol Lindstrom and illustrated by Michaela Goad. Now, why am I talking to you about a picture book, right? You're too old for picture books? On our spine label of all of our picture books, there is an E. Why do we put an E on our picture books? The E stands for everybody. Because really good picture books are not just for young children, they're for everybody. And this book, I enjoyed it. I just thought it was,
I just skimmed it, but it's gorgeous.
It's gorgeous. The artwork is beautiful. This is a book, it's a poem about the protecting of water. And the author is Ojibwe, by the way. And it is about the role of humans in protecting water, and what the role that water, and you see a baby in the womb surrounded by water, how integral water is to our life. But there's also a vision, a prophecy, it's an old prophecy, of a black snake that will invade their land and do great harm. And you can see this pipe with a snake head. What she's referring to is the Keystone XL pipeline that is coming from Canada across the United States. And there was an event called Standing Rock, where many people from Native people from all different nations, and white people as well, people of color, went out and protested this pipeline being put through sacred indigenous land. And it got violent. It went on for a long time. And this book was inspired by that. The author and her son went to what's called Standing Rock. They went to Standing Rock to protest this pipeline. And we are filming this ahead of time, by the way. As of yesterday, the new president issued an executive order terminating the installation of this pipeline. So this book feels even more timely than when it was written. We're filming this on January 22nd. I believe that's the date, right?
I think that's
You're
today, yeah.
a little bit later. But that happened yesterday or day before yesterday. Maybe.
I think yesterday.
The last 2 days.
Last 2 days.
Anyway, this is a beautiful poem. It's got some of the most beautiful illustrations I've ever seen in a picture book.
So pretty.
All of us think this is going to get the Caldecott on Monday.
Yeah.
We will see.
So if so, maybe we'll edit our video and be like, Caldecott winner!
Yes. So this is called We Are Water Protectors by Carol Lindstrom, illustrated by Michaela Goad. And a couple of other books I want to mention. We have in our teen section, if you have teens in your house, there's a series by Joseph Bruchak, who is one of the preeminent Native American writers. He's been writing books for a long time for children. He's one of the first ones that has become prominent in children's literature. And this is, he writes, we have quite a few in our children's section. We have one historical novel about Sacagawea. He's written about the Code Talkers. But this is one he wrote for teens, and I think this is his only series for teens.
I think the Code Talkers is in teens.
Is that in teens too? Okay. So this is dystopian, like Revolution on the Reservation. And I have not read this, but one of my favorite teen readers has read it, and he said it was fabulous. So this is called Killer of Enemies, and I'm not sure if there's another name. I think that may be the series name. Joseph Bruchak. And finally, An Indigenous People's History of the United States, the Young People's Adaptation. And this is recommended, both of these are recommended for ages 12 and up. I'm guessing that some of the detail in this history is going to be maybe more brutal than what we would have in the tween section.
Yeah.
And this was written by Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz, and it was adapted by Jean Mendoza and Debbie Reese. And Debbie Reese is well known because she runs the Center for Indians and Children's Literature. So she is kind of the foremost expert in the country on indigenous literature. So that might be something if you want to find more nonfiction history.
Yes.
Again, in the teen section. Undefeated is also in the teen section. Although I would feel totally comfortable with any person. I think you're going to maybe need to be a strong reader, 10 and up, to read this one, but there's nothing inappropriate in it for kids. And that's our selection of books about Indigenous people and primarily written by Indigenous people.
Yes.
We hope you've enjoyed this. What are we doing next time? I can't remember. Is it?
I think it's Black History Month.
That's right, Black History Month. We're going to be doing books about Black history.
Yeah, fiction and nonfiction.
Yes, sir.
And I will see you next week for Crafternoon. Until then, bye guys.